All right, today we're joined by Katrina Gilbank, a safety and risk leader known for her practical, people-first approach to building strong safety cultures. Katrina builds real-world experience, connection, safety to leadership performance, and trust across some complex organizations. If you're responsible for managing risk or shaping a safety culture, this conversation will give you some insights hopefully you can use immediately. Welcome to the show.
Hi, happy to be here.
We'll hit you with a hard one right out the gate, Katrina. I'd love to know how you got into safety, or in your case, environmental. What led you? Was it a planned thing, or did it just sort of happen? And the journey you've been on in your early career.
So I actually started out going into veterinary medicine and
Okay.
volunteered at a farm that did horse rescues. And with that, decided I couldn't do that for the rest of my life. And by chance, got an internship with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. And from
Okay.
there, got into environmental compliance. And once I started getting into risk management planning, EPA conditions, things like that, I got dragged into process safety management and now do all EHS.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So yeah, quite a journey then. The equestrian thing I have to ask, and for the listeners, I apologize. I grew up heavy rodeo family. Okay, like lots of horses was sort of our thing. Was it just traumatic to be a part of the horse rescue, or was it just the work? Like, what pushed you away from that?
So I heavily involved with horses. I still have the same horse from when I worked there
Oh,
20 years ago.
okay.
Still have him. And it was just sad what we
Absolutely.
were getting in and like I can't enjoy horses and have this be my job.
Absolutely. No, I was curious because I can imagine how my aunt saved a few before, and we had a ranch. I retired one of my horses when he just got too old, and it was a beautiful reserve, but still it was my most traumatic childhood memory, I think, was sending him off into the sunset metaphorically, because I didn't get a chance to visit him after that. So yeah, it is the bonds we have with animals for sure. Well, that's awesome. I would love to get into kind of what was your first, you start with the municipality and thinking about like environmental or safety, doesn't matter which hat. What was your first moment where you felt like you wanted to keep going? Like what drove you? You get your first job. A lot of people fall into it. Some people go a different path. What convinced you that this was something for you, that maybe you want to make a career out of it?
So one of my first duties was actually part of the Clean Boats program with
Okay.
Wisconsin. And what you do is you sit out at a boat landing and you're talking to people and you're educating them and
Oh,
walking them through what invasive species are. And that was a lot of fun. I got to interact with some really interesting people that had really interesting things to say about how they thought they worked within that program and what
right.
they understood all of it to be. And that was super fascinating. And that's something I've just carried through since then.
That's amazing. Did you have any good like leadership support, mentorship in that role or any of those early roles? Like I find a lot of these guys, and I want to pass this on to the audience, obviously, how important it is that site guy or the division guy can actually be in forming the next generation of safety leaders, good or bad. A lot of people leave because maybe they had a bad one on the first go. And, some people choose the career forever because they had a good experience. Somebody helped show them the ropes. If there was anybody in your life or a story around that, it'd be great to hear.
I did have, I started out north of Wisconsin. Then when I went for my first master's, I shifted down to the Fitchburg office. And I had a fantastic boss there and a fantastic mentor that I worked with there too. I'm still friends with her on Facebook, still
Oh,
talk to her every now and
amazing.
then of
And it's a
just
her.
walking.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yep.
Yeah, yeah. Females in the workplace. The EHS particularly is obviously an underserviced niche. Environmental and sustainability, we're seeing a nice trend there. But the safety side, especially like any field safety, process safety, not a lot of females in the profession. So we need better representation to all you gals out there that are looking for their next thing.
It's actually my first safety adventure was at that site
Okay.
with her support, um, being a very apparently brave 20-something-year-old. We
Oh,
didn't have the right gloves to work a steam cleaner,
ah,
and so I moved the boat and parked it where my boss parked and said, I can't clean this because the gloves are twice as large as what they need to be. I can't handle it safely. So that was really my first
exposure.
misadventure into safety of
Yeah,
getting
no,
the
that's
right
good.
PPE.
It's funny. I was just talking to one of the directors of NSC, and she, in her early career, they used to have to wear the Timberlands, the big boots, and they had to have steel toes. And they didn't have a female option. So she was always kind of juggling around that as well. And that's actually, it's a good point. PPE, another area that is a little bit underserviced by and large, for sure. So thinking about that story and coming into maybe something a little more heavy, I guess. And before I jump into that, did the leader that you were under, did she help you kind of formulate any philosophy, beliefs, thoughts around safety in terms of practicing? I mean, obviously you guys were heavily engaged with the community in that role, it sounds like, because these weren't even people, this wasn't contractors, this was actually like the public facing role, right? For the boat cleaning. That's kind of awesome, actually. A lot of people in Florida probably you probably still could use your services because we're all learning as we go. A lot of new people from New York definitely don't understand having their first boat, what goes into it, as you might imagine. I have a few friends in that category. But yeah, was there anything you learned from her that you could share or that maybe shaped your kind of philosophy on safety or your approach to safety at all?
So a lot of when we're talking about like these invasive species and just talking to people, her philosophy and something that has stuck with me is people don't want to do the wrong thing.
Oh,
They just don't know. And sometimes you just have to explain it to them, and you have to make sure you explain it to them in a way that they understand. I can still, to this day, devolve very quickly about small leaf pondweeds. I like them, they're very fascinating. No one else cares, it's fine.
I was going to say, we might have to have
But
you give a definition of that for me and the rest of the audience, for sure.
any really small pondweed that is really difficult to identify because
Oh,
they're just so teeny tiny.
got you.
But it's not going to mean a whole lot to my random musky fisherman who really just wants to tell me about his setup. He's fascinated with all the equipment that he's got. He does not care about the small leaf pondweeds per se. So trying to frame everything in that gap of
Yes.
this is where they're at, this is where I need them to be. How do I build that bridge? She's the one that really started that for me.
That's amazing. And that's cool. You got to do it on the public facing. So did that kind of carry into, now in a directorship role, getting into some of these leadership roles you've been in, that sort of practice with your own people? And I'm guessing, obviously, working with a lot of non-safety folks in the organization is usually the trick. That holds true. You think most people on the front line, they care. They just don't usually know there's a right way and a wrong way, potentially.
And for a lot of times for safety, if we come in and we say, hey, you must do this, well,
Right.
that's fine and dandy, but do they know why? Do they understand the context of why that's important that they need to do that? I had a arc flash incident
Okay.
that came down to the employee didn't understand the context behind being
Uh,
told, don't go touch that. A very, very lovely boiler operator. We installed a brand new package boiler. The controls are different. The old style, he was able to go and open something, flip a switch, reset things, new style. He got thrown across the room. He was fine. I have
thank
no
God.
idea how. He was incredibly grumpy,
I imagine. Probably didn't feel
which
good.
fair.
Some muscle pain lingering there potentially after having your body seize up, and the wall might have helped with that a bit too.
But he didn't understand the context. It
Hmm.
wasn't explained to him why the difference existed and what would happen.
Right.
Unfortunately, he learned the hard way, but
Yep. Might be a great advocate going forward. Unfortunately, some of
he was.
your best frontline advocates are the people that have experienced the wrong way once, and they realize
Yep.
that there are reasons behind some of these practices that we have. So, well, and I want to get into that. So I know you did some hazmat. You've been more heavy on the environmental side. A lot of us in the network are all, dealing with environmental and safety. We talk a lot about safety here, but talking a little bit about environmental and hazmat in particular, I find that fascinating. What about that role or, doing that job? Was there, I mean, there's obviously a safety component with that, but what were the challenges and kind of how did you approach that coming from where you were with the government, and then that was the private sector, I believe, as well for that role, right? Yeah.
So I got into a lot of the like highly hazardous chemicals between like process safety management, hazmat, and
Yep.
RMP, right? Relatively early on when I was an inspector and had to be, an asbestos inspector and I was
Oh,
HAZMAP
fun.
trained and just a whole slew of stuff they put me through. And it's really, really fascinating the patchwork that we have to navigate as EHS professionals to be able to do the right thing, both from a compliance perspective, but also a people and environmental protection perspective. And
Mm,
that patchwork does not match up very well. We have a lot
interesting.
of regulatory bodies over the same thing. They don't all have the same thresholds. They don't all have the
Yes.
same requirements and qualifications. And it can be really, really nutty to go through all of those and try to put all of that into one cohesive program for your
Hmm.
site to actually use.
Yeah, that's
I think it's
challenging.
fascinating,
You think, well, that's
but it's
great. Well for
problematic.
you. Well, and it does seem to change a lot. I mean, did you experience any of
Yes.
that? The regulatory changes too are also a challenge. I think for a lot of orgs, especially at a scale where across states or different, I mean, countries for a lot of our clients, a lot of our community, the global can be, I don't even know how you'd approach it, to be honest, because there is so much regulation and it sometimes completely relevant and sometimes not relevant at all, depending on where you're located and what the operations are and discerning what is applicable and then what you're actually going to do in terms of a repeatable practice is got to be challenging.
I've been part of a group that we had some international requirements, we'll put it that
Right.
way, in some places where there were none.
Right.
So
Yeah.
trying to get the buy-in from that team of, well, we're going to go the most stringent to
Yep.
protect ourselves. We've done the review, and if we comply with A, we're going to be fine in B, C, D, but D doesn't have anything. So working with them to get the buy-in of, no, you really can't just throw that outside. That's
That's
really
yeah.
actually not an option.
Oh, that's
And
amazing.
here's
Well, and it's
why.
amazing. Some organizations, I think, I mean, it sounds like you're part of a good company because I have unfortunately seen a little bit of that outsourced risk approach, subcontract out, et cetera, to get around the responsibility of dealing with
Yep.
things, especially in countries where the regulations are a lot lighter than the States or Europe or what have you. So no, that's amazing. And it sounds like you obviously, I mean, that's the beauty of us being in the space, I think, is we care and you can actually transfer if you do it right. As you mentioned, if you teach people, they mostly want to do it right. Most people want to have an environmentally friendly operation. And I'm always fascinated, like people don't understand groundwater effects and the chemical runoff, and like they don't understand how long the impact is, how downstream the impact can go. So I mean, if you have any good stories or examples or from your personal experience or anything in that regard, just to kind of highlight how important it is that things are disposed of properly, or maybe an example of where they weren't.
One of my favorite examples is, for some reason, a floor drain. For a lot of people, it just goes to nowhere. If it's down the drain, it's
Oh,
gone. It's like magic. Like
right, right, right,
it goes to a treatment facility, and if
right.
you put something down the drain, let's say a few thousand gallons of oil, you can completely take out the city's wastewater treatment plant.
And it sounds like, yeah, that sounds like
Yes,
something you experienced. I'll say
about
there. That's a
2:30 in the
very
morning.
specific example. Yeah, yeah. No,
That's a
yeah,
fun
that
phone call, but
I didn't even think
yeah.
about that. Yeah, from a public sector, which is a very unique approach. That's the other interesting thing about all of this is businesses have a level of scrutiny that the public doesn't, and they usually, hopefully, have a level of education around the importance of proper disposal, proper handling of materials, et cetera. And so, yeah, having you been in municipals and government agencies in the past and seeing kind of the more public downstream effects, that's actually really huge. It isn't something they teach about in school. I mean,
No.
they're starting to, and we're having more programs around that. But yeah, that is actually, I hate to say it. I remember as a kid, I mean, people used to just dump grease and oil and, the local mom and pop shops, the auto body shop, it wasn't that long ago that we had, just set it and forget it, dig a hole. And that was the approach. So we're slowly getting out of the dark ages when it comes to the environmental side of things, I think. But is there, kind of playing on that vein, is there a moment that you personally had a situation, an incident, an event, something that you were managing or you oversaw, and did it have some profound impact or change the way you thought about environmental or health and safety practices on the board? I know it's a tough question, and if you don't have an answer, I mean, awesome. That's great.
I have to clean it a little bit.
Okay, there we go. I was gonna
So I
say.
had a significant injury at
Okay.
a company that I worked at where what it ended up being a reportable
Yep.
injury,
Yep.
and this person's life will never be the same. And it was coming back to when we did the investigation, we really, really focused
Went
on this
through.
for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And it came down to a mixture of complacency
Hmm.
and audits were in place, inspections were
Right.
in place, but they weren't looking at 100% of what it needed to. So we
Yeah.
had this glaring blind spot that we had no idea about until it had already gone too far. So one of the things that really for me has come from that is assume that no one wants to get hurt. No one wants to cause an issue. No one wants to make their lives more difficult. However, sometimes your program still has to be, re-reviewed by maybe more people than
Hmm.
what we had at first. The importance of bringing in multiple variations of the staff that are going to be physically doing that audit or physically doing the work. Our issue was a night shift
And
that we didn't know there was a difference between how day shift and night shift were doing this
yes.
particular task because it was protected by lockout takeout and machine guarding and some environmental policies that there were like 6 or 7 different things touching this task, unfortunately.
And the human element is one of the hardest things to combat, which is why it's so important that, safety is a culture at the
Yeah.
orgs. It's some organizations have better luck or better practices or, more focus is maybe part of it on that. But is that so after that event happened? Did the organization at the time, or you yourself personally, I mean, did you guys make any changes or anything that you would? I mean, obviously, it sounds like more people touching would be huge, which makes a lot of sense to me. But was there anything that shifted in terms of the way you approach the next job or the next role?
A lot of it comes into making sure that there's an actual structured framework to bringing in the people that are on the front lines and physically doing the work rather than who's able to come in. Because if it's who's able to come in, I'm going to get people, they're going to be opinionated. It's going to be great. I really enjoy
Yeah,
bringing them in, even if I
yeah,
don't necessarily get the answer that I'm looking for, which it's still a great time. But it's the
more often
people
than
that
not.
maybe don't really want to talk that I
Interesting.
still need to bring in to have one of them say, well, actually, we don't have that cabinet unlocked in night shift. Oh, well,
Oh,
that's good to know.
yeah, yeah.
That
I
that
have
that would
seen
explain, wouldn't it?
I've seen so many things with day shift, night shift, or these. A lot of plants are running 24/7, or more or less, and they might even have a 3 shift, and even just the difference between the morning and the evening and the night shift is sometimes pretty glaring. So yeah, it's definitely an area of focus. It's not just the operations; it's how each group within the organization treats the protocols and practices and things as well. Now that's a good takeaway. So kind of flipping the script on that, was there any time at any of these roles that you had a safety? It could be you, it could be the leadership in general had an undeniable kind of outcome for the positive that made a significant change. And sometimes these are small shifts that can have outsized returns. And so we're kind of looking for maybe a moment or a story or a point in time where safety made a real impact in a tangible way, shifting a practice or a process or.
So I had at one of my roles, I walked into a known big culture issue. And
Oh,
my first week there, I had somebody walk up to me and somewhat out of nowhere just tell me, I don't even know why safety's here. I don't know what they do. I'm like, oh well, ow.
yeah,
All right, let's
I'm
let's
human.
let's do something about this.
Right.
I don't know why you guys are important. Okay. So it sounded really simplistic and very, very low-hanging fruit when we implemented it. But like many places, we had break rooms and we put up TVs in the break rooms and it was company announcements and yada yada yada. So I did 2 things. We implemented a anonymous QR code-based safety concern reporting tool.
Huh?
All you needed was a smartphone. That's all you needed. And if you
Was
didn't have that, I mean, most people have smartphones now, but there was a website too that they could go to separately that we set up at some locations. So they had that. That then got populated out to go to the entire EHS team, and we implemented a process that within a day it needed an owner. Within 48 hours after that, it needed a plan. And
wow.
maybe that plan was basic. Didn't have to be
Right.
anything super, super fancy, but it needed a something. We cleaned up that data and then put it on those TVs in the break room
Nice.
so they could see what we were doing and see that we were taking care of what they wanted us to look
Yep.
at. And We saw, I'm not gonna lie, I really thought with the anonymous reporting that I was gonna get a whole bunch of nonsense and
Right.
who knows what. I didn't get a single weird report. All of it was completely relevant,
Wow.
completely appropriate to submit. It was fantastic. And we could see that improvement in our culture assessments. We
Man,
saw the
I got it.
increase in near miss reporting. We saw the increase in somebody just coming to us and saying, "Hey, I need some help." And we saw an increase in our safety committee attendance.
Oh, okay.
I didn't
Dang.
use any extra
All downstream
technology.
of that. That's crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah, from a simple
I used
shift.
Teams.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Not, I mean, you
That was
use the
it.
tools you have. Yeah. You don't need to make it complicated. Well, I will say it's funny because everyone I talk to, we ask some variation of that question. And I do find it is often the simple things that can sometimes have, I mean, probably a low cost, relatively low effort solution for you. The brilliance here, though, that I want to highlight for everyone, I think is, and this is the missing piece I see at a lot of organizations that do not have a good safety culture. Not only did you give them a way to report, but you gave them like every day at least in the back of their mind, you gave them a visual that you were actually doing something, that their reporting and their attention to detail mattered. I mean, that's actually, it's brilliant. I haven't even heard of anyone doing that, like putting up, say, you have your time since last injury on the wall or what, the old ticker symbols. I mean, you see that stuff, but that's like a doomsday clock. I mean, this was like a positive, a real positive spin and putting safety front and center for them every day. That's pretty awesome. That's a good idea.
I did
I
have a
bet there's
couple
some other,
people in the
yeah,
break
I bet
rooms
there's
like
some other
do my
companies that,
walkthroughs and they're like, "That's me."
yeah, yeah. Well, and that,
I took your
exactly.
name
Yeah.
off of it for a reason, but okay.
Right, right. They've got to take credit for it, though. But getting the front line involved in safety in a way, I think that is actually the missing piece because we've been talking about that a lot, like the culture point. I mean, you look at incidents, it is very hard. There's just that human component. And that is one of the hardest things because you can have all the best practices, you can have the machine guarding, and someone still doesn't use it or takes it off or whatever. And that's a lot of times where we see root cause. There's some portion of that comes down to the human part. And so it's like, how do we change human nature? Which is a very tall order for a poor safety person who's doing 20 other roles, but showing them that they're making an impact is a really powerful, and this is a simple, relatively simple implementation of getting them actually hands-on in a way that doesn't detract from their work, but also gives them a voice. That's amazing. That's really good. It's probably actually one of the better tips I've heard so far. So, and there's probably a lot of ways to do that. So did you guys, I guess digging into that just a little bit, you have the ability to do the near miss reporting. You guys, from the dashboarding side, like how did you guys do that? Was it just an Excel? You just tracked the data and pushed it out, or like how did you get the dashboarding component of that for the break rooms?
So for the concerned reporting, it was through Microsoft Teams as an Excel spreadsheet that then I set up some
Amazing.
workflows to populate out just for some basic graphs. We had a separate DHS software for incident reporting and document management and things like that.
Yep.
And I've used a few of those, honestly. What I've done in other locations to get something similar is to modify how an incident can be reported and just expand out what an incident is.
Mm,
A lot of people understand what a near miss is, but there's this weird gap between is it a near miss
yes.
or is it a safety concern? If you expand it out and just have it be a tool that you can use for all of those things and it's all the same form, you're going to have some increased compliance with actually reporting things because they don't have to figure out, well, do I need a concern form or a near miss
Right.
form? Or do I just give it to the safety committee? Or I don't know what to fill out. And that's too much work. I'm not going to do it.
Yes. Do not add more work. That is a cardinal rule I've found. If you want any success with any new tool or process, try to make it easy. Well, and actually I like that. I guess so. 3 takeaways here for me, and hopefully everyone else on the line. Make it easy, make it visible, and then prove ideally that you're doing something. Right. So, because I think a lot of organizations, some people make it easy, right? You got a mobile app or you got the other applications. You make it visible because you're probably having a quarterly or a monthly or maybe even a daily like safety talk or something. You have some visibility to safety, but making it visible actually is a gap for a lot of organizations because no one on the front line has any idea what their injury rates are, or how many near misses reported, or what the corrective actions assigned and completed are. I mean, they don't have that insight. And so it makes a lot of sense why they wouldn't be fully bought into a program that they don't really have a tangible hand in. So that's amazing. And the other problem is too, I know we had a company and they did power washing. And they were having a bunch of issues, lockout, tag out, because they got electrical components and a lot of water. So there's, risk areas there. And obviously there's a lot of water on the floor. And so a lot of their near miss reporting was around those issues. The problem was the cleaning crews would come in at night. And so they were addressing a lot of these safety concerns at night. And then they had some preventative practices, and they were, the LOTO obviously would get improved over time. But it happened at night. And so a lot of people, thinking about a tangible benefit or tangible application of this from my world, they could have thrown up a screen or something there just to track all those corrective changes or the suggestions that were improved on or something, because I don't think they did improve the safety practice, but they probably weren't. They were missing that final component of like actually letting the front line know that they actually did something, because the reports were coming in, but then there's no closed loop for the front line to even know safety cares enough to do anything about it. It could have just been the cleaning crew or, whatever safety policy that they did. And it was actually their input that changed the practice. So no, that's amazing. Awesome. Well, I'm going to go into a few things from like a macro perspective, if you're good with it. When you think about safety, what do you think is kind of broken about our approach to safety? You mentioned one thing early on the call I do want to highlight, because I think everyone struggles with it. We don't talk about it enough, and it's environmental and it's sustainability now and it's safety. It's always been, is the gaps in regulatory, legal, what is compliance, varies so much. And that's a huge, huge challenge. So, one thing that we could maybe dive into a little bit is, what would you recommend for people to alleviate that very common issue, and anything else that you think, general practice, safety needs to maybe work on as an industry, if you will?
So what I find a lot when I'm talking to, even if it's the executive team or a site management team, we'll say, well, OSHA requires us to protect our employees against this hazard. And they said, well,
Right.
what does OSHA say we need to do to protect them? They don't. The
Yep.
regulation is you must protect them. They're not
Yep.
going to be prescriptive and say you must do X, Y, Z, because what is true even for my facility in Fond du Lac isn't going to be the same for my facility in Adel. Those are two very different locations. Yes, they
Yep.
have lockout takeout. They don't have the same equipment. OSHA
Right.
cannot write a regulation that spans all of that. It would be absurd to try to read if you think it's painful now.
Yeah. Well, and please don't, because most of the regs in general, I don't know. I don't know if they were written amazingly well for consumption in
Yeah.
the first place, let alone giving them more and more complexity. So no, that's absolutely true. Well, and you kind of mentioned too, there's environmental compliance, there's safety compliance. There's obviously a lot of overlap sometimes with exposure and chemical management, chemical handling and inventory reporting, et cetera, et cetera. And so I guess similar pain points. Is it worse, do you think, on the environmental side?
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree. I'd love to just kind of dig into that if you have any thoughts or anecdotals around that as well, because I know the environmental world is like, man, safety's hard, but environmental is infinite in its complexity, because you can even have county level compliance
Yep.
obligations that are unique
City level.
or city city level. So that gets really complicated when you're short staffed and have a lot of sites, which many organizations do. So
So environmental, and because I'm an environmental person that went into safety, if I have like a coordinator or a technician that kind of did the opposite, especially I tend to poach maintenance technicians as my safety techs. That works out beautifully.
okay,
Really
smart.
recommend.
Yeah,
But
that's another good tip. There you
trying
go.
to understand how EPA functions versus OSHA
Yes.
is painful. You have 29 CFR
Yep.
for labor law, right? You have so many more for environmental that it's really important to understand what agencies have jurisdiction and be willing
Hmm.
to reach out to say, I don't understand.
Directly to the agency.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And this
I
is
like
some of
that.
my bias as a prior government employee, but
You've been on both
it's
sides. I didn't even think
way
about that. Yes.
it's way
Yeah.
better to write some help emails than have to
Right.
write an enforcement letter.
Yes.
To be blunt, for the agency worker, it's less work.
Oh, well, and I mean, it's probably, I imagine there's a little bit of not grace, I would say, because I know there's enough government agents and who's in the field a given day. But at least if someone's asking, they're making an effort instead of you just
Yeah.
having somebody show up on site one day and do the audit. And the ignorance is not a excuse that the government much cares for. Sadly, the fines will still be given, in my experience. So
Yes.
yes, no, that's actually a really good point. I didn't even think about. I mean, obviously, I know these people are. Have you used any like technology or databases? I mean, do you see that evolution right now? I know there's a lot of tools out there, and honestly, I've never seen anyone like fully crack the code. There's content providers, and then there's applicability analysis, and there's levels to the game, obviously, at a macro. But you've had any success with that at all, or any thoughts on that as a whole?
So I say reach out to regulators, at least in the Midwest. If you go to some of our state universities, they'll have an extension program, and a lot of what they'll do is EHS compliance if you reach out and ask. They may not
Okay.
have the exact expert, but they are a little bit of a level in between, and some areas actually have programs where they'll help you go through and review the regulation for what's applicable. They're going to help you do an audit program, right?
That's amazing.
UW Extension will do industrial hygiene,
Another
which is
tricky industry
awesome,
potentially. Yeah.
right? Trying to figure out exposure. That's
Yeah.
something that they'll
Yeah.
do.
Well, and it's funny, and this is totally off topic, but I'd love to, if you've had any experience with this, people don't think about this, but the types of exposure. So
Mhm.
if you have a chemical, it may not be harmful, but it could be harmful to, say, someone who's pregnant.
Yep.
And, as strange as that is, we are seeing that happen more and more in the workplace in the sense that we're getting more and more ladies into these industrial positions, even as in safety and environmental. And so these things actually matter. It's not just so that there's levels and levels to this game. And then obviously you have to manage your chemicals because if you buy something randomly, which a lot of the smaller organizations, the medium organizations, they'll just, oh yeah, we're going to run out of the hardware store. And it's like, well, you don't have an SDS and you're not labeling the bottle. And, there's issues to that as well when you end up with 1,000 bottles of random chemicals that are not accounted for in the event of, something going bad or just someone showing up and doing an audit. So
And proper storage.
a lot of improper
The
storage.
amount of times for like my facilities teams, I've walked into their closet and gone,
Yes.
Please, for the love of all that is holy, stop storing your chlorine-based cleaners with your ammonia-based cleaners.
Nice. Yeah.
I actually like you guys.
Yep.
If you could stop creating chemical hazards, that'd be
Yep.
fantastic.
That is, I didn't even think about, I've seen things of that nature downstream, but I didn't even think about that from the sense of what is not a harmful chemical in the presence of other chemicals can become very harmful or flammable or, explosive or et cetera. So yeah, goodness, that is, yeah, the importance of EHS people right there, people. So that's awesome. Thinking about, is there anything, something I do want to get your take on too, especially since you have such a varied approach. We have seen this trend where the minor, non-severe injury rates, really good performance since the 70s, 80s, nice trend lines going down. But SIF events have kind of reached this critical mass where for whatever reason, they are not improving. We were stagnant. In fact, we've seen a little bit of an uptick the last few years for whatever reason. And I don't know if you have any thoughts or insights into that. I'd love to get your opinion.
So my opinion on a lot of those is that we've gotten to this really interesting point where we're not necessarily set up to look at these events appropriately. I think we've gotten into this. If we have the programs and they're followed, you're good. But we're not taking a more holistic approach of, okay, well, what if something goes wrong and they can't do XYZ? For example, if I have a construction project going in and something odd happens and somebody takes one step past a gate and now they're in the path of a robot that they're testing. So
Right. That's
we're
true.
kind of, we've got these blinders on that we're
Yeah.
not looking at some of this abnormal work and the level of depth that we need to. And we're making some assumptions that the program is going to suffice, but we have these much more complex processes. We have these much more complex um, pieces of machinery.
Right.
For an example, I had a near miss, thankfully, with a lockout situation that should have been a Cat 3. The programming shouldn't have let any of this happen. When we go back and we, really, really go into the root cause, we'll come to find out we had a password on the programming for each machine, but it's one account with one password and it got
Oh,
shared. So somebody went in and they're like, oh, well, I want to learn. I want to go in and look. And they inadvertently deleted things.
oh, even better. Okay.
So now the programming isn't correct and things can move when they're not supposed to. Well, should software security be safety?
Right. No, but it might be in given
It
situations.
ended
Yeah.
up being.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's absolutely that's an interesting use case too. Yeah, that especially now, I've worked with some of these really large automotive manufacturers, and I mean they're moving more and more and more robotic. I mean everything
Yeah.
from the forklifts to the main production lines, and I can't imagine that's not going to change. That it's going to decrease in the future, right? I would imagine it's going to kind of continue on that trend line, but they have to get to a point where pretty much isolate all the automation equipment completely because it
Yep.
is insanely hazardous, and there are malfunctions sometimes that can do
Mhm.
things that are unplanned and unpredictable. If there was a human there and they had proper safety protocols, they still might not be able to count for those variables that can occur. So I think as the world gets more advanced, there's going to be safety is going to have to get really, really smart, maybe even a little technical, it sounds like, in some of these situations. So, and that actually segues really nicely. Technology, tools, kind of evolution across safety, environmental. Love to know what you think is needed or what you've had good experiences with. There's a lot of hype around a lot of stuff. Your simple system in this interview was a great example of something that's like, there's almost no excuse for that. I mean, you could probably replicate that with SurveyMonkey and a QR scanner and your team's Excel dashboards, which I'm guessing almost everybody has access to those things. If not, the TVs on the wall would be the only barrier to entry for that implementation. So yeah, I'd love to get what's noise, what's a buzz, what's real in your experience.
The ability to have a simplistic, accessible app to do incident investigation and anything that you need to be at the Gemba, you need to be physically there looking at it. Being able to just have an app, stormwater inspections, right? I'm
Yeah,
looking at spill kits. One of the
yeah,
most beautiful things I've ever had at a 52-acre campus that I was inspecting. So I had a lot of options. I had a GPS tag on it. I could stand next to it, take a picture, GPS tag. It was beautiful.
man,
There
coming
was
from paper
no
to
question which one I was looking at.
whatever. Yeah, that's significant. Well, and the nice thing is now too, I mean, I don't know about your experience and you have some ISO experience, so it'd be good to kind of maybe we can tie on this. We're talking about being more stringent or the more stringent compliance standard wins in the perfect world. Do you see that the audit logs, the ability to verify if you have an incident or you have an exposure, illegal exposure, damage, et cetera? A lot of our clients are in those situations. That's where I think obviously technology can really shine as well, because it's just very hard with paper or logs of any kind to do that. I'd love to get your take. One of the biggest things when I was doing air compliance was bad values, right? Because you have these crazy calculations. They're all feeding each other. You got multiple pivot tables going on these insane spreadsheets that take a NASA engineer to build. And yet somebody puts a zero in the wrong spot
Yep.
and everything in the whole spreadsheet's bad. And the problem is with Excel, obviously, it's very hard sometimes to triangulate where the bad data even is. Or you don't add a zero. Obviously, it can make a big impact on a certain calculation as well. So, if you had it on the environmental side, I mean, you mentioned obviously the mobile app, but have you had any experience or funny stories around the reporting?
I had to laugh at the spreadsheets because I've had to fix a few
Yeah.
where I've
Oh,
gone,
me
there
too.
is just from a mass balance, there's just no way. Just
Right.
physically, you can't.
It doesn't make sense.
So what I've done in some of that, so the software that we're using right now at my current employer has a sustainability module. And one of the benefits to having something like that is that they're often set up so that you can put in a tracking metric and then it does something to the data to spit out your final report.
Oh, okay.
So the benefit of that for environmental, right, is that if you're looking at a throughput that you need an emission factor to get to your air emissions, you can build that as a sustainability report. I mean, that's not sustainability per se. A lot of sustainability now is asking you about air emissions, but
Right.
there's no reason to not use that type of framework to do some of your calculations because then all you're doing, depending on your software, ours, I can issue it out to but say finance, and I want to say,
Mm,
hey, I need to know what our final production numbers were for this piece of equipment. All they do is put that number in. The beauty of also using the system like that is that for a lot of them now, what I've seen is that you can set up a expected range. So it'll do that data quality for you. You know, you set it if it's 20% out of normal or the previous average, it's going to flag it up. It's a lovely use of technology because I'm not relying on a very overworked,
right.
very busy safety manager who's happening to do environmental to catch that, well, maybe 30,000 tons isn't right
Yeah.
when they see it
Right.
once a year.
Oh, and they see, yeah, exactly. That's actually a good point too. Yeah, that there's so many people that have to put in data for environmental that are really, really not. So you want to make sure that there are as few fail points as possible, for them to mess anything up. Because yeah, the spreadsheet thing is the amount of organizations that are still like sending an email to ask for a number and then trying to, that's sometimes 100 locations. They got 100 emails, and then they're trying to input that into a spreadsheet, and they got to make sure each one's in the right place. And then there's no way to like audit in case something's off. Like you mentioned, data controls. Yeah, it's a huge, huge headache. So that's a good piece. I want to ask you, what do you think about AI coming into the picture? Have you had any exposure to it? Any thoughts on it?
In some ways, it's really, really nice because, for example, the software that we're using right now, we do have AI enabled on some of the incident entry so that if the AI is picking up that it looks like it was a fall from height, it'll pop up and say, well, how high? From what?
Mm,
You know, so that type is really awesome. It's really promoting a more broad investigation, making sure that we have all the data in, things like that. When we're doing some quick checks on data, that's one thing. There's one AI technology that is driving me nuts, and it's only because it's being suggested to me so much. I don't want a camera system that's looking for safety glasses.
oh, okay. Yeah, I was gonna say, it's
I
funny you
just, I
mentioned
don't
that.
want it.
Yeah, yeah.
I, uh,
Too much
I,
Big Brother, do you think? Is that kind of the fear? Yeah,
I've had
I worry
I've
about
had
that too.
employees complain, and I'm really hesitant for anything that may give them a reason to not want to come talk to me.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
want that to be that open door, and I don't want them to feel like they're getting monitored in that way. I've had much better luck with safety glasses of just changing some of those norms and making an expectation, and then I have some peer pressure that's helping me get those safety glasses on their faces and
Get
not
them on.
on their shirts or on their head.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of those things too that's hard because people, they don't even know. They don't even know they're not wearing them. They're like, oh, yeah, yep, it's one of those things. So, no, I find that very interesting because I do see, and I will say, I have a lot of experience with some of these, what they call computer vision companies. And they have a lot of applications that are fascinating. And there are some really good use cases that make a lot of sense. The gap right now is figuring out a way that technology isn't punitive, it's
Mhm.
preventative. And that is a hard line to walk. And I think it's probably true of all safety cultures. We've seen a lot where it's like kind of punishment heavy. People are getting written up. They have a certain number of violations before they lose, their cert or whatever it is. And that also is a double-edged sword. I mean, obviously you have to have some controls in place, but
Yes.
you don't want safety to be looked at like, sadly, on your end, like OSHA. Nobody's
Yep.
excited to see OSHA show up at the door, at least in my experience. So you don't want to be that person internally
Yeah.
for the organization if you want to have a frontline safety culture at all. So,
And that's part of my issue with it. I don't want to be a safety cop. I'm a safety support.
safety
I'm
cop,
here to
that's right.
help you get
Yep,
what
yep,
you
yep.
need. I don't want somebody looking at the cameras and using it as an excuse to get somebody, and
To
it
catch somebody. Yep.
feels
Oh,
like
you
it
did it.
could.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Absolutely. Do you have any predictions you think in the next 5, 10 years? Like, do you see any big shifts or industry trends, safety, environmental, from your end of the side, from the compliance or the legal side? I mean, anything that you think people should take note of?
I'm hoping that we see quite a bit more going into some of this in real time mapping.
Okay.
I've been seeing a little bit more about that of just getting, even if it's because I cover multiple sites, right? If it's something that is process dependent, that AI can help us with that, that a safety alert is issued out to these particular facilities
Yes.
because they have similar risk. I'm hoping that we can shift a little bit more towards that. I'm seeing that a little bit with like heat mapping of
Yes.
safety incidents being able to be generated out of these softwares and things like that. I think that would be more of that real-time data to get to our front line of, hey, by the way, this has been reported. By the way, in this department or in a similar department, we've had several near misses reported recently of water on floor.
Right.
Let's help look for that and solve it.
Yeah, I've actually seen a few AI applications that had some really interesting, going back to your night shift example, because if you think about it, a lot of times you're running a dashboard on a site and you have data on a site, but it probably is not broken up by shift. And so there's no way for you to really delineate between day shift, night shift. You just like, oh, hey, we got near misses. We had an incident. We had problems. Whereas AI having the ability to go a layer deeper into, the data itself, time, and then run a report that's like custom without having to go to somebody and build it and do all the complexity. There's some really cool stuff if companies figure out how to harness that data. Do you find there's a lot of resistance? I've heard this a lot where companies are very afraid of AI having any access to safety data, environmental data. I think that also is a barrier right now. It's like, I think the software's there, the technology is probably there, but the compliance side or the IT stamp of approval is a little harder to come by depending on the organization you work for.
A lot of it for what I've ran into has come down to just protected data
Protected
of
data.
how this type of access is going to work for, especially when it comes to injuries.
Yeah.
How are we protecting all of that while still being able to use it in a way that makes sense? For the most part, that's what I've ran into. Not necessarily IT not wanting to approve it as much as just not quite understanding the processes and the protections that we need to coordinate versus how we put that into a contract with a software company.
Right. No, it makes a lot of sense. Seeing as you've had some experience with software, one thing that I find a lot of safety people struggle with, environmental people struggle with, is getting any sort of approval, budgetary, IT, procurement, whatever it is, to actually like deploy. Go, hey, we got these ideas. We need some improvement. We're still working on paper. We're still working on spreadsheets. Do you have any advice for those people in that position on how to secure budget or approval for something that the organization needs to maybe get out of the past on?
So I've implemented at multiple companies now a much more expensive
Okay, there we
software
go.
solution.
Very successful then.
And
Yeah, if you even got price involved, that's a win.
so one of the things we came down to is just putting that context on if I am spending or my team is spending, the company is spending this much time to get bad data because we don't have the time and we don't have the right protections in place to actually be able to look at what percentage of my recordable injuries from 2023 to 2025 are slip, trips, and falls. What department? No idea,
Wow.
because paper doesn't help me do that.
Right.
The software, though, does a beautiful job of doing this. And I can tell you that on Mondays at 4 a.m. is when we have most of our injuries in this department. Well, what in the
Yep.
world is happening on Mondays at 4 a.m. in that
Went for
department?
4 a.m. Yep. And sadly, I see that trend so much that it's a time of day. Sometimes it's contractors and people don't realize it's like, oh, it's at 7:30. And it's like, well, that's when the
Yep.
third party, whoever comes on site. And it's like, oh, well, yeah, none of them have any knowledge about XYZ safety practice. And so they're probably doing whatever they normally do. And so, yeah, without that kind of granularity, it is hard to go past the threshold of safety improvement. Data is sort of the precursor to that. So is there anything that, I guess, just rapid fire, closing things out, underrated like safety belief for you? Is there anything that people should think about more than they might?
I think for a lot of it, you do have to assume that somebody is going to screw up a process. Like,
Okay. I like that.
don't lose sight of the fact that we are all still human and safety is still subject to that, right? I've walked across an entire plant without my safety glasses before.
As the person.
How?
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
And I
No,
was
I've
so
been there
proud
too.
of the person that finally caught me.
There you
It's
go.
like
Even better. See, that's
oh,
safety culture in action right there. Yeah. Somebody's open enough to come call you out. That's something,
it was
right?
fantastic.
Yeah.
We had a little program there that we had some of the newer break rooms are the airport style where you grab it, you scan it, you do your card and whatnot. You can have accounts with a lot of them too. So we actually started handing out cards that they could scan it to put money on their account for good safety practices.
There we go. Positive.
Thankfully, when she caught me, I was like, oh, I got one of those cards.
There you
Thank
go.
you.
See,
I'm
I
gonna go to
like
the
that.
PP machine.
I like that too. And a vending machine in the building too. That's not a bad idea. It's funny how simple, honestly, people are. I mean, we all are. It doesn't need to be some crazy crazy thing, like just small incentives on the positive end of the scale. So it's not all stick and there is a little carrot somewhere in there, is very valuable too. Yeah. I've had a lot of the safety professionals on talk about small positive encouragement that they've had pretty outsized returns on. So it's another good takeaway for sure.
As a safety professional, get the data before and after when you implement that.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Like,
And then, yeah, justify
so
the budget for
yeah,
whatever else you want to do next, right? Yeah,
say, hey, with $5,000, that's happened to be what I spent on these dinky little
cards.
cards.
Yeah,
For that, we decreased the number of forklift near miss by 60%.
that's huge. That's
They're like,
huge. And yeah, I
you
mean,
did? I'm like, yeah. And now they make a point of if they drive past me, they're like, I'm wearing my seatbelt.
right.
So
That's awesome. Yeah, yeah. They're like, hey, good card today. Well, and I was going to say, so have you had much experience? Because I've noticed at the C-suite, or, the divisional level or VP level, whatever it is for the organization, given its size, that's usually where the money decisions are made, right? Or operations director, whatever. And so that challenge I find, and I'd love to get your take, we tie it to like you reduce near misses, but to someone up there, a near miss does not represent a loss of revenue and it does not represent fiscal law. Sadly, it is somewhat about the money at some part of the organization. They are looking at the P&L in a manner of speaking. So is there any thought process, or if you had any experiences where maybe you got to go a level deeper and talk about how, the Heinrich triangle or what have you affecting how many of those near misses translate, or we, had a reduction of workers' comp or claims or lost time or what have you on the back end of one of those programs?
So I've done that quite a bit, and that's why I wanted to make a point of get your before and after data because you can use that. You know, I've done a lot of education, and I try to sneak it in to some
Yeah,
of our
there you
other
go.
KPI and like metrics reporting at the C-suite level of, hey, just as a reminder, Heinrich's triangle is a thing.
Yes.
Here's why we expect to have near miss reporting. And oh, also, by the way, remember that forklift thing? We saw this go down because we're keeping it here. But if it were to go up, here's what it costs for OSHA. Here's what it costs for workers' comp.
There we go.
Here's your liability reduction for the company. Here's your risk reduction. Here's how to contextualize that.
Yeah.
That goes a long way. I haven't really met a whole lot of C-suite that'll just come out and say, I don't care.
No, right.
But you do have to help them make their business decisions, right? And sometimes that feels a little cold to say, well, if a forklift incident happens, you're going to cost this much in OSHA fines, you're going to open yourself up for this, you're going to open yourself up for workers' comp to the tune of XYZ. It feels a little cold, but you still have to help them make that business choice.
Yep. No, I think it's so key for people, especially that are newer in the space, especially on my side of the fence, because I spent a long time helping people buy software. So sort of my, my nerd out space. But I am always shocked that if you are a part of operations and you can improve efficiency 1%, the CEO has some simple math to be like, absolutely, we'll give you a large amount of money and we'll get this done tomorrow, because it's just very straightforward, going to improve the business. It's going to improve profitability. Safety is a little more challenging because it's risk based, reduction based, instead of like a profit center. So you have to get a little more
But
creative.
But the
But
safer the
yeah,
workplace, the less the turnover you have, the more
exactly.
efficiently people are going to work. And if you can reduce your turnover right there, that's a heck of a lot of money.
Yeah. Oh, it's huge. Well, people
It
have
is
no idea.
expensive for new people.
They have no idea. I hate to do it because I am the worst at this, but I will typically, if you have a bad, nowadays, you have to be extra careful. If you have a bad event, I had a large client, they had a big event. They hadn't had the type of event in like 30 years. And it was a really big event. And so it made all the news, right? As they do. And it was bad from a cost point of view, but they lost some of their big contracts. And then they lost
Mhm.
about 44% of their stock valuation inside of like 3 weeks. And the CEO actually lost his job at the top as downstream of this 6 months or whatever it was later because of this company performance overall. And obviously they made very significant changes. So without selling, too much fear, what we do is really important. And I think it affects everyone. I've had some people actually almost get jail time. This is another thing people don't realize. Somebody actually can go to prison if things aren't followed properly and you are found negligent with OSHA, with EPA. I mean, you literally can do jail time. Usually it's fines and, what have you, but you can get a criminal record and I know this because I've seen it. So yeah, I think
So have I.
letting people know that is possible and what the upside and downside is I think very essential, and people are afraid to say that. But the problem is you are protecting people's lives. Your story earlier, I was thinking I had a safety event early on for a client, and we used to do like gap assessments, SMS reviews and stuff. So we would go do like process analysis, I mean, PHA kind of work. And he was a huge guitarist and he had an hand injury. And it was a totally preventable injury, and it happened at a couple other sites a couple months before. So they had some legacy data, and it really should have been prevented. And it was kind of human error. So, again, it's not totally like safety wasn't doing its job, but they just didn't have the culture. They didn't have the adoption of new practices that were preventative. And yeah, I mean, this dude is never going to play his guitar again. And it's just like when you see that one time, I'm so sorry. When you see that one time, it changes the way how hard you will push for projects. you will get very, very motivated because what we do matters in a way that's different than we had more production, we made more revenue this year. There's a very tangible human component to safety that we have to protect at all costs. So awesome.
Now,
well, this was amazing.
What you can also do.
Oh yeah, please go ahead.
So what I've seen a lot more with the sustainability sphere and with some of the companies that I've worked with is that our stakeholders are requesting more and more and more. And I've used that to my advantage, that they expect us to be at a certain safety level that is built into the funding that the company will be getting.
Yes.
So therefore, give me some of the funding.
No,
and
that's
let
huge.
me put in this safety system, let me put in this brand new software system, because for one, you don't have the data to even give to your stakeholders.
Yep.
That's a problem. You're not going to get that funding. And for two, if you want all these sustainability certifications, and what I've been seeing a lot with the customer audits too, because I take part in some of those, they're asking for more and more and more and more. Use that. Get involved in that as a safety person. Don't just hand over data and ask what they're doing with it. And use that to help get you your resources and your funding as well.
I like one thing, and I actually want to highlight this for everyone, is kind of maybe even the final point. A lot of what you talk about is stuff I think people do on some level, but you were doing it like we do safety. You're doing it before the need occurred, right? You're basically, it's not preventative in this case, but you are preventing them telling you no on a budget fund because you are proactively positioning safety as important to the organization. And I do think, unfortunately, there is a huge part of success in this role, especially as you get into like leadership and higher levels, and you want to make a big, profound impact across a large organization. Internal selling on the front lines, essential, but also at the top is essential. And more and more, I love sustainability. I do, from the simple fact that for whatever reason, in my humble opinion, that, especially in Europe, has driven a ton of exposure to safety as a metric. Because now, yeah, it's on their 10K and their investors are asking, and if they got VC funding, sometimes the rates are tied to their sustainable performance, which has a component of safety. And so it's like all of these things are making safety much, much more C-level than they might have been at most organizations in the past, which is amazing. So it's awesome. Great tip. Well, like I said, I appreciate the time. Any last minute thoughts or ideas or anything you want to say before we wrap?
Make sure that you're getting on the plant floor. I know this for some safety people, this is duh, but sometimes it's just that simple, right? Get your boots on, you get out there, you talk to some people, and sometimes you get just the most lovely of stories of really great things that have happened, and sometimes you get shared things that, well, by golly, I could go do something about that.
Right. It's huge. And this is coming from a director, everyone that's listening. So just so you know, even if you're at the top, you still got to put your boots on. I've heard that many, many times. So hopefully to the people listening, they will take that advice and run with it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the time. We will be back next week for everyone that's tuned in. And everyone have a safe day out there.